What if I told you that right now, as chess players sit silently staring at a board, their brains are lighting up like a city at night? Not just one region, but dozens, firing in coordinated bursts across both hemispheres. This isn't a metaphor. It's what fMRI machines actually show. And the effects of chess on the brain go far deeper than most people realize. Here's the part that surprised researchers. When they compared masters to casual players, they expected the experts to think harder. They expected more brain activity and more effort. But they found the opposite. The better you get at chess, the less your brain has to work. Not because you're thinking less, but because you're thinking smarter. Your neural networks become so efficient that familiar patterns get processed almost automatically, freeing up bandwidth for the hard stuff. That's not laziness, that's neuroplasticity in action. Your brain literally rewiring itself for efficiency. And this isn't just about chess positions. Structural MRI scans show that long-term players have measurably different brains. More gray matter in the frontal and parietal regions, the areas tied to planning, spatial reasoning, and working memory. Altered connectivity between networks that handle attention and executive control. These aren't subtle differences. They show up clearly on scans. So how does this rewiring actually happen? It comes down to something neuroscientists have known for decades. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When you practice chess with real focus and attention, you're not just memorizing moves. You're building pattern libraries, thousands of them. And over time, your brain starts to offload those patterns from slow, effortful processing in the prefrontal cortex to faster, more efficient circuits in the posterior regions. You stop seeing individual pieces. You start seeing structures. Chunks of meaning that your brain recognizes instantly, the way you recognize a face without having to analyze each feature. This is one of the most solid findings in expertise research. In classic experiments, grandmasters could glance at a real game position for just a few seconds and reconstruct it almost perfectly. But there's a twist. When the pieces were placed randomly with no logical structure, their advantage vanished. They weren't remembering better, they were encoding better. Patterns, not pieces. And that distinction matters. Before we continue, let me just point out that everything in this video is science-backed. Full references are in the description, because this channel is committed to fighting health misinformation, not adding to it. So what does this mean for the rest of your brain? The parts that handle memory, focus, and self-control? That's where the effects of chess get really interesting. Imagine you're a 10-year-old who can't sit still in class, whom we'll call Daniel. Daniel's teachers say he's smart but unfocused. His parents have tried everything. Tutors, schedules, reward charts, nothing sticks. Then, someone randomly suggests chess club. Not as a fix, just as something to try. 2 years later, Daniel's working memory scores have improved on standardized tests. His ability to hold information in mind while manipulating it has shifted measurably upward. That's a core skill for math, reading, and almost everything. This isn't a fairy tale. It's from a real 2-year school-based intervention study that tracked children receiving structured chess sessions against controls. The chess group showed greater improvement on working memory indices. Not dramatic, not magical, but real and measurable. And that's important to understand, because the benefits of chess for kids aren't about turning average students into geniuses. They're about training specific cognitive muscles that transfer to other tasks. Executive functions such as planning, cognitive flexibility, and inhibition are also heavily taxed by chess. Multiple studies with children show improvements on planning and inhibitory control tasks after structured lessons, especially when the intervention is consistent and intense. That means weekly sessions for months, not a few casual games. But here's where we need to be honest. When researchers use rigorous active controls, say extra math lessons instead of passive free time, the advantage of chess often shrinks. It doesn't disappear, but it gets smaller in comparison. Chess is only one of several cognitively demanding activities that can offer cognitive benefits. Music, strategy games, even certain video games can do the same. The key isn't chess specifically. It's sustained, effortful engagement with something complex. Chess just happens to be very good at providing exactly that. The same applies to attention training. Classroom studies often report that children in chess programs show better teacher-rated focus and fewer off-task behaviors. Special education research shows improvements in concentration tests, as well as modest math gains. But the novelty, challenge, and motivation of chess may be doing as much work as the game mechanics themselves. It's fair to say chess can train sustained attention, especially in kids who stick with it. But it's only one effective attention activity among many. Now here's where the science takes a clinical turn, and where some of the most promising data is emerging. For people who struggle with impulse control and emotional regulation, structured chess programs are showing real results. A randomized clinical trial compared online chess training to a VR serious game and a control group in adolescents with ADHD. Both active interventions improved attention and ADHD symptoms compared to controls. Chess performed comparably to purpose-built therapeutic software on several outcomes. That's not a small thing at all. Another prospective study found that adding chess training for children with ADHD reduced symptom severity and improved attention and self-control. The evidence isn't perfect. Some studies lack strong control groups, but the direction of the findings is consistent. For kids and adults who struggle with attention and impulse control, chess-based programs show early promise. Not as a replacement for medical treatment, but as a meaningful add-on. There's even ongoing research using chess-based cognitive therapy in addiction treatment, targeting impulse control and executive functions in people with alcohol and tobacco use disorders. The main trial includes neuroimaging endpoints. We don't have results yet, but the fact that serious researchers are investing time and money in this tells you something about where the preliminary evidence is pointing.
And what about stress management? What about handling pressure?
If you've ever played blitz chess, those rapid-fire games where every second counts, you know the feeling. Your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat. You have to make decisions under acute time pressure, and you can't take them back. That's a training ground for stress management, even if we don't have lab studies measuring stress hormone changes. Clinical work in ADHD and substance use suggests chess-based interventions can improve emotional regulation and executive control in ways that might generalize to handling stressful contexts, such as exams, deadlines, and high-stakes moments. It's a reasonable claim, partly supported by evidence, but not yet firmly proven. The same nuance applies to mood and well-being. Interventions combining social interaction with cognitively engaging games often report reduced depressive symptoms and improved quality of life in older adults and clinical groups. Chess-based therapy programs note improvements in self-esteem and engagement. But mood is usually a secondary outcome, not the main focus, and sample sizes are small. Chess probably does make some people happier and less stressed, especially when it's social and meaningful. But this is low certainty territory. And the evidence gets even stronger and more urgent when it comes to older adults. A French cohort study followed older adults for nearly 20 years. People who regularly played board games, including chess, had about a 15% lower risk of developing dementia. They also showed slower cognitive decline, even after adjusting for education and baseline cognition.
Systematic reviews and meta-analyses of board game interventions in older adults report small to moderate improvements in global cognition and executive function, and sometimes better quality of life.
Now, we can't say chess directly prevents Alzheimer's. The research doesn't support that claim. But regular engagement in complex games like chess is associated with better late-life cognitive health. It's a strong candidate for a brain-healthy leisure activity, but not a medical cure or a guaranteed shield. And this is actually a good place to talk about creativity and soft skills, because the evidence here is more mixed than you might expect. A study of 87 primary school children found that those receiving chess instruction showed greater improvement on standardized creativity tests, including fluency and originality, after 12 weeks compared to control groups. So yes, for kids especially, chess can be one structured way to practice generating and evaluating novel ideas.
And what about life skills, such as resilience, patience, discipline, and responsibility?
These claims are everywhere in chess culture. Kids learn to tolerate losses. Adults talk about improved patience. It's plausible. It fits with what we know about skill learning in general. But here's the truth. There is very little controlled data showing that chess training causes changes in personality traits. Self-reported player testimonials and teacher experience are valuable, but they're not the same as controlled studies. Nevertheless, self-reported observations are consistent. Chess does have a tendency to train resilience, patience, discipline, and forward thinking. Some people even suggest that you can learn a lot about a person's personality by simply playing chess with them. Now let's talk about the claims that get the most attention and the most hype. Does chess really make you smarter? Does it boost your grades? Does it raise your IQ? This is where myth-busting matters the most. Here's what we actually know. A famous Venezuelan project in the 1980s reported IQ gains of around 6 to 7 points in second graders after months of chess lessons. That sounds impressive. But the study comes from reports and summaries, not peer-reviewed journal articles. Nevertheless, these reports did show a tendency. However, when contemporary researchers run more rigorous trials with active controls, they didn't see any striking improvement of grades or academic performance that can be linked to playing chess. So this remains speculative. Meta-analyses show that stronger chess players do tend to score higher on IQ-like tests. But that correlation may simply mean that smart people in general gravitate to games like chess. It doesn't mean chess caused their intelligence.
So, what about academic performance?
A 2016 meta-analysis of 24 studies found short-term improvements in math and small gains in reading after chess programs, especially when chess replaced regular lessons and when there was no active control group. Sounds promising. But then a large randomized controlled trial in England with nearly 3,800 students found no long-term benefit of 1 year of chess instruction on standardized math, science, or reading scores when students were tested a year after the intervention ended. The careful conclusion from researchers is that chess in schools may produce short-term academic gains, but the evidence is insufficient to establish robust, lasting benefits. Placebo and motivational effects play a major role.
So here's the takeaway.
Chess is a genuine cognitive workout. It engages multiple brain regions simultaneously. Visual spatial processing, working memory, pattern recognition, executive control, forward thinking, and the ability to concentrate. Long-term practice is associated with structural brain differences and more efficient neural networks. For children, structured chess programs can improve working memory and attention, especially when the training is consistent and intensive. For people with ADHD and impulse control challenges, chess-based interventions show promising early results as therapeutic add-ons. For older adults, regular engagement with complex games like chess is linked to lower dementia risk and slower cognitive decline. But chess is not a miracle. It won't automatically raise your IQ or improve your grades. What chess offers is something simpler and more honest. A structured, engaging, endlessly deep activity that exercises your brain in multiple, meaningful ways. That's a brain-boosting benefit that's not to be neglected. And if you play long enough, your brain will change over time. Not because of magic, but because of repetition, attention, and the slow accumulation of patterns. That's neuroplasticity. That's how mastery works. And that's what the science actually shows. If you found this video helpful, please share it with someone whose brain health you care about. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next science-backed video. Stay curious and see you in the next one.